artists around the world. Teaching artists around the world. Artists around the world. Teaching artists around the world.
Well, anyways, hey, and Abigail says safe flights. So we're so glad to have Lee Sumpter with us. Welcome, Lee. Charming Philadelphian. I'm gonna do a little intro, and then we're gonna just get to know your work and ask some questions from our artists here.
Sure.
Cool. So Lee Sumpter, Ph.D. is a mythologist. I like that that's first. Educator and social practice artist who employs mythic literacy and eco-conscious designs as modes of creative resistance and community empowerment. Yes, that's all. There's a lot there. Her academic work and social engaged art projects synergize world building and afrofuturism, environmental justice, and land sovereignty as a praxis for freedom. Lee is founder, creative director of Myth Media Studios, an art and design studio that employs myth media and liberation technologies to address existential concerns and environmental issues. Oh my God. That's awesome. There's a lot there. And thanks. So I almost want to, everybody just take notes and we'll dig into each one of those terms as we go. But certainly, Lee, welcome to the school. And maybe as a way to start, you could just describe, I hate to be like this, but maybe just a general sense of your practice and introduce yourself to the folks here.
Yes, well, thank you. Good morning to everyone from all the places you're tapping in from. I'm happy to be here and so excited to learn more about your school. It sounds super cool. So yeah, like I said, I'm born and raised here in Philly, but I've spent a lot of time in New York. I was in New York for 12 years, and there, what brought me to New York was getting my master's in art education. So I really started out in the art world as an art educator, which is really important because there's such a didactic element to my practice. And I've always been involved in community engagement. A lot of my roles at museums and, cultural spaces has been around the mode of community engagement and public programming. So naturally, when I shifted into my own art practice, engaging the community and using my art as a tool to educate and raise awareness was always like kind of at the forefront of how I took, my approach to creating. And it was also very collaborative. But also one of the things I think that informs my work most of all is my doctoral work. I got a degree in mythology and psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. My dissertation was on apocalyptic film and media and its impact on culture and consciousness from this kind of mythic and psyche point of view. And you can imagine that working on a project like that, I mean, the dissertation was something I can't really say, I have the teeth for like scholarship, like for the long haul, but it was just something I felt called to do, something I wanted to learn more about. Mythology is just so fascinating to me. And just as we think about art as a tool for social change and how it can be used, to engage communities, I really feel that mythology can do that. It's almost like a power tool. If you think of art as a tool, I think mythology is a power tool because it comes embedded with story, and stories are transformative. And I feel that, and of course, mythology is an art form all itself, and it can incorporate so many disciplines of art. So for me, I thought to myself, well, after pursuing this kind of like academic challenge and path for so long, I just felt like we were approaching like the year 2012. This was back when I was writing my dissertation. So if you know anything about that time and the Mayan calendar and just like the hype of, what folks were saying about the end of the world. I mean, we've dealt with so many possible apocalypses, right? So writing in that time and someone who actually, from a psychological point of view, I've been dealing with what I call the apocalypse complex, or affectionately known as the Sarah Connor syndrome. But to be quite honest, I believed in my lifetime that we would see the collapse of civilization. Like, I truly believe this with all my heart. And so after getting my degree, I said, well, I really got to put this into community practice. I got to use what I've learned to do something. Like, I wanted to take action. I didn't just want to like sit in an armchair and teach about it. Now that I got my PhD. So I started working with communities, particularly in the Black urban farming communities, because these were folks, I mean, you know, at the time, the art world wasn't really so concerned about the very practical side of how art could be used as a tool for survival. So I started aligning myself with communities that really did take survival as something that was a priority. You know, it was a part of their daily lives, you know, particularly when you're dealing with urban communities that are dealing with, you know, food deserts and food insecurities and,
Hey,
you know,
Lee,
yeah,
Lee, let me just jump in because there's just so much I want to stay
yeah,
with the early academic before we transition to this, because it's amazing. And
yeah,
I've got so much. So first of all, mythology. When you say it, I just was thinking that word is so like, you know,
yeah,
you said it's a power tool. So you go into mythology, but clearly you're dealing with contemporary mythologies too. So
right.
I want to kind of get a sense of, to put a pin on like how you thought about like, so typically mythologies, I mean, you know, I don't know, but I'm just thinking mythologies typically have a time span that are quite long. They become these broad kind of narratives that show life together. But in the
Right.
mediatic age, the contemporary age, these stories mutate very quickly with the culture making. What did how did, you know, you were looking into apocalypse. Maybe give us a few, I'm kind of interested in this thing between academic apocalypse, the food deserts, and like community that bridge, which I'm really
Right.
interested. It makes sense, but not a lot of people move from, I don't know, almost something science fiction, like mythological, to very brass tacks. So let's
Right.
stay in the mythological. What did you, in that PhD, what did you glean? What was your kind of sense of things from that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Like for me, I felt like the mythology was a framework for reality, you know? So like a lot of people think that myth is kind of like an antithesis to truth. But what I learned at my school, you know, it was like this idea that mythic consciousness is actually the foundation for reality in the material world. And if that was true, right, I believe that the stories that we tell really could help to manifest a new reality. And if we weren't careful, if we were all kind of caught up in a narrative around gloom and doom, around destruction and global annihilation, then this is in fact what would unfold for us in the future. So for me, it became this idea that you could use stories and mythology to, I mean, because when you think about it, like religion is based in mythology. So when you think about how, you know, whole empires were launched and civilizations conquered as a result of religion and the religious consciousness, right? So if you can think about that in a modern day contemporary times, and I wasn't just thinking about like Star Wars, like for me, the kind of mythic apocalypse dramas were really those that dealt with the near future. Even like, for example, Octavia Butler and Parable of the Sower, and this idea of how real apocalypse can be for everyday people, you know, not for like, you know, people fighting aliens and spacecrafts and whatnot, but like, what does it mean? I mean, not that I don't, you know, I don't have imaginations around that as well, but I really did start to think about, well, how would I prepare for said scenarios, you know, and how can I align myself with people within my community that are thinking about these things like I am.
Makes sense. I think there was a phrase I read, I forget, it was a Zizek thing, but he said something like, we live in an age where it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism.
Unfortunately, yes.
But it's interesting that the end of the world is a very real mythology, right?
Yes. Yes, and I actually teach a class called around myth and nature, is about fractals in the future at Haverford College right now. And a lot of the films and the stories that the students are reading and engaging with are apocalyptic, and they call themselves Generation Z, right? So I guess they're like, I don't know, between 18 and 20 years old or something. And they were saying that their generation is the one where exactly what you said, that they see capitalism, so many are writing their essays around capitalism as like the evil force, you know, like the capitalism is like the Death Star in their mind, you know, it's like the Terminator. And they feel that they are a generation that can truly realize and understand what it's like to live in an apocalyptic moment, because I mean, they're dealing with so much, from climate change to literally a global pandemic that was threatening all of our lives and still is. For them, it's a very close reality. So I can't imagine what it's like, because my brain growing up in the 80s and the Cold War and the films that really impacted me and set me on my path. Because I should say most of my things, my study is definitely around film and media narratives. But for me, I can't imagine how that has impacted the youth today who are coming up, or even the babies born in the pandemic.
So I love this. So then, just to kind of think about the movement towards communities of resistance, but also, I suppose, a certain kind of politics, in terms of a hands-on self-determination that you were interested in aligning yourself with. Let's talk. Can you kind of walk us through what that meant, and also in terms of your own life journey, clearly how you brought the kind of narratives around mythology with you, or that work you had done?
Yeah, I think so. What you're asking is like, how was it kind of like a practical thing for me? Like, how did I make it?
I'm always interested in when the academic moves into the world, and then like how you, I mean, I'm obviously, and as artists, I almost feel like that's the move that artists kind of do at times.
Yeah, it was a tough one though for me, to be honest, because particularly around the nature of the work that I was doing, because I was just so adamant about the art of survival. That's what I was calling my practice. And so for me, I felt like, well, I started this work around, like, I would say I was really getting into it around 2010. Okay. So around that time, and even after 2012 had come and gone, like people were kind of like, all right, you sound like a broken record. We're moving on to other things. And so the projects that I would propose did not really, they weren't really received well. A lot of people thought it was either fear mongering, I've gotten that, or felt like, I was kind of like, taking this dark position, and they didn't want to fund projects that were not really empowering people to think positively, because they just saw the word apocalypse. But for me, apocalypse has always meant birth, death, and rebirth. It is a cycle of transformation, a pattern of change that is as old as time. It belongs to humans and to nature and just to everything that exists. And so I always tried to like create narratives that focused on the rebirth. And so slowly but surely, I felt that like I was getting the hang of like how to lead with the story, and not lead with apocalypse, but lead with the idea that story can be transformative. My project Graffiti in the Grass is this kind of transmedia project that is a future story, afrofuturist story set in Philadelphia in the near future. And it's dealing with an impending basically global catastrophe, right? And of course, for me, I'm trying to like bring in all the references that I know. So for me, a part of my practice in the community engagement part, excuse me. Yeah, part of that is tapping into the stories that already exist around me.
Yeah.
The folks that are doing the urban farming, the folks that are using their art, what I call escape artists, that are using their art to overcome and transcend the limitations of their lives, no matter what that existential threat may be. Maybe
you can, in terms of perhaps even Graffiti in the Grass, or like a few of your projects, could you just describe them in a kind of like, what did it look like? What did it entail? Just so we can get a sense of that from you. Well, I can share my screen and show you. Oh, please, yeah, show screen. Pictures, yay! Yay, pictures. All right, hold on one sec. Okay, so can you see this? Yes, yes. Okay, great. So I just wanted to say too, a quick note is that my father is an artist. My father is 92 years young. He's still a practicing artist, but this was taking place, this is a shot from obviously the 70s. Well, maybe it was the early 80s actually, but this was on South Street, right in front of the old Bacchanal, which was like kind of like this haunt for artists that was owned by Joe and Ellen Tiberino, also well-known artists in the city of Philadelphia. But there was this project that they focused on that was about artists against nuclear war, And so for me, that's the one that my dad did. It's very much in a comic book style. My dad had a lot of different styles, but for me,
that was kind of where that seed was planted in my own psyche as a young person around how art could be used to kind of address these issues. But I'm just going to fast forward. You mentioned graffiti in the grass, so I'm going to forward to, these are some images here from the graphic novel that is in progress, featuring this protagonist, Roxy Redmoon. She is African and indigenous descent with ties to the Lenni Lenape here in the Philadelphia region, the Delaware Valley. I have been collaborating with various artists on the concept art and the kind of like storyboard images of this story. First, I was working with an artist named Eric Battle, another artist based here in Philly, Ron Atkins, who did these illustrations. And so we would collaborate on not just the story, I was writing the story, but I would tell them like, what I wanted the characters to look like. I would even sketch them out, very detailed art direction around, what they would look like, what they would be wearing, even the style of graffiti and things of that nature. So that was a part of the thing.
This is so good.
Yeah, these are some other images from it. And of course, involving science fiction and Afrofuturism, this idea of the multiverse has always been a fascination of mine when it comes to how the multiverse plays itself into apocalyptic stories. I mean, from Spider-Man to Doctor Strange, and I mean, there's just so many.
Wait, what's the multiverse?
So the multiverse is this concept, right? That there's not just one reality or one world that we occupy. There are multiple universes, maybe even multiple versions of ourselves in other realities and universes. So that's it in the nutshell. I don't claim to know the science of it, but it's fascinating when you're talking about world building and storytelling, But yeah, so graffiti in the grass is kind of like the through line, the narrative through line that really informs all of my other work, because even like the Cozy Catastrophe escape room project that I'm working on is a mobile escape room with like challenges that are based on what I call the art of survival. But these scenarios are also based on the situations that the protagonists and characters of Graffiti in the Grass find themselves in. So it's kind of just like a video game is often narrative based, and there are these major characters and backstories that inform the world and the universe of the game. Very much so in that same vein, Graffiti in the Grass informs the Cozy Catastrophe escape room that I'm working on now. That's one of the current projects I'm trying to make happen. I'm trying to think. Oh, and this is the trail off. Trail off was the, I don't know if anyone got to listen to the story that I share, but that was just kind of like an 8-minute clip from the audio story. And my assigned trail was Bartram's Garden, the Schuylkill River Trail. And so a prologue chapter of Graffiti in the Grass was essentially Chronicles of Asylum is that prologue chapter that features different characters. It's kind of like the same world, but different characters and but a similar timeline for Graffiti in the Grass and those main characters. And so, I mean, if you get a chance, the project is actually about to be rebooted. There are 9 other stories that connect to 9 other trails in the Philadelphia region. Pennsylvania, and even it goes out even up, I think, towards the Poconos. So those are like some of the ways in which the stories are kind of informing my practice. And I can stop sharing too, so I can see your lovely faces, unless you want. Do you want to see? You want to still see?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, great.
Show a little more, and also too, I would love just in terms of like maybe just to walk us through one of them, just in terms of like, it's nice to hear also like like how you realize them, like your conception, and then we know, but you and I know, everybody knows, it's not easy being an artist between trying to make yourself survive, and then getting gigs that give you enough budget to do something you care about, and then well, the kind of, I mean, I think it's important to kind of put that stuff all on the table as a practice, because
I'd be happy to share that, because to be honest, I've really had to get creative. Like it was really much a creative problem solving situation for me, because for one, I was moving into really trying to further my practice as an artist while also like adjuncting and, doing other gigs and things. So I never really had big chunks of money to really implement my vision to the fullest. So what I would have to do would be kind of piecemeal things and pursue opportunities that would help me realize some aspect of my vision. And this is a great example of that, because there's no way in the world that I individually could have produced a mobile app. I don't know if any of you know what it takes to make a mobile app, but it's expensive. It involves so many folks, designers, and just so many elements, from the sound design to the production design, all the stuff, right? So for me, when the opportunity came up to apply for the Trail Off project, because this is what this came from, the Trail Off project that was produced by Swim Pony and the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. So what happened was I applied for that. I was selected as one of the writers. And then they said, well, you could do any story. Now, I already had a story, Graffiti in the Grass, but it was taking me forever to have that see the light of day in my elaborate transmedia vision, multi-platform situation, escape room stuff. So I said, all right, well, I could do a prologue chapter instead of trying to get birth my entire epic on my own. Let me try to at least let the world hear one aspect of this larger story through this prologue chapter, Chronicles of Asylum. And so that's what I did. And it was great because what I got to do was I used Final Draft. If you're familiar with writing scripts and stuff, it was my first time using Final Draft. I used Final Draft because in trying to design for an audio-based story that was also connected to a landscape, right, where you would kind of find yourself immersed within it, you had to write it as if you were writing for theater. At least that's how I saw it. I approached it in that way. And little did I know what a feat it would be, because of course I'm thinking big. And so I wrote parts for multiple characters. I think there might have been 9 different characters in my story, which meant Swim Pony had to cast 9 different actors to play the roles of, the cast. And so that was
Swim Pony, the organizing body?
Yes, run by Adrienne Mackey.
Okay.
And so that was super exciting because she does a lot of theater stuff. She had done her own work and projects as an individual artist, but she was literally producing these other artists' stories along with PEC. And so, yeah, I was like, let me try this out. I was so excited. I actually got to play a role. I played a small role of one of the radio hosts. But it was so exciting. Like Ursula Rucker, for example, was, I was able to cast cultural figures from the Philadelphia world. For me, Ursula seemed like the perfect person. And for those of you who don't know, she's just an amazing poet, an artist here in Philadelphia. And she kind of has this oracle kind of vibe, And so she was cast as Supernova, which kind of played that oracle archetype in the story. And there were other award-winning actors and just folks from the Black-led theater community were cast in my story. And like I said, I would not have been able to do this. I wouldn't have had the budget to cast these actors or even the network to know who these talents would be, So for me, it was a dream come true to have this opportunity to have at least one aspect, one chapter of my story realized through this app, and to also connect to Bartram's Garden. I had already done programming with them before. So yeah, that was one way to make that happen. And also through a residency through Haverford College, the Urban Ecology Arts Exchange. Through the residency, I was able to produce Art of Survival, Agents of Escape. I think I shared images from that, and that was a collaboration with Theater in the X. And they helped me to kind of create this kind of theater of the oppressed meets, kind of like disaster prep drills and improv, and we did 3 scenarios, like how to escape a submerged vehicle, in a flood. We did how to survive an active shooter. And we also did how to survive an alien invasion, hostile alien invasion. Because again, we're trying to incorporate mythology and storytelling into this idea of survival and preparedness to try to disarm people's fears a little bit, because it is a scary topic.
Now, it seems to me like because of the nature of your work, you do move through various disciplines. And obviously every discipline has a different set of expectations, aesthetic ideas of what's good, different players, and also different funders.
Right.
You know, it's interesting because you bridge between writing, theater, social engaged art, ecology.
Right.
And I suppose that's both a benefit and also sort of frustrating, because sometimes with grantors, if you don't fit the perfect box, they don't know what to do with you.
You're exactly
So,
right. You're
yeah.
exactly
So
right.
how do you, but I also appreciate, you know, I must say that knowing Philadelphia, there are a lot more, well, I wouldn't go too far for all the artists. You know, Philadelphia is like a lot of cities that the artists at the school are at, which is there never seems to be enough opportunities. And, but there is more growth, at least in the last decade, around ecology, public space, and cultural programming.
I
And
would say so too, yeah.
yeah, and certainly like this app, I mean, it seems quite exciting, and not something you would have saw 15 years ago. You know?
Exactly. It was very innovative, I think, you know, and I, you know, hats off to Swim Pony for conceiving of the project, and, you know, really, because also too, this project launched right before the pandemic got pretty bad, you know? And so it also created an opportunity, because when museums and gallery spaces and
Sure.
cultural spaces were trying to figure out what people were going to do, everyone was switching to online. You know, this was an opportunity to say, hey, get out, walk on the trails, because people were being encouraged to get out and walk and be active anyway, just to like escape their isolation. And so this project did offer that, but at the same time, you know, everything was impacted by the pandemic, in the sense that you didn't get the turnout or the audiences that you had really had hoped for. And so that's why the reboot is coming. And I'm excited about that, because even though, you know, folks do know about it, I think it needs a reboot, you know, kind of, so a relaunch, so that folks can, now that I guess things are getting a little bit better with the pandemic, the world opening up a bit.
I think it's safe to say that. Here, when we get to the whole group, we'll ask some questions of you, Lee, and thank you for introducing some of your work. Certainly, I think, I mean, we didn't go into all kinds of stuff. Certainly, it was very quick, but oh, hey, do you mind going into the group?
Oh yeah, sure.
But I was thinking too, like, you know, Philadelphia historically, but particularly in the current age too, has not long, but you were part of a movement of Afrofuturist artists, you know, in the last 5 years. Certainly it became an interesting subject and touched on for something with the orchestra had come out of this city before.
Right.
But maybe you could just talk briefly about Afrofuturism and its information, because you have a particular, what did you say, a particular blend of Afrofuturism that's your version.
Yeah, I think for real, for me, I think I am, you know, a mythologist first, I would say, because I've always been interested in the global story, you know, from my perspective as a Black and Indigenous person. Like, I feel that because I'm dealing with apocalyptic stories, it usually deals with an end game that concerns the entire planet, right? And with that, you know, Afrofuturism only becomes one perspective, you know, but yet and still one that is very valuable, and one that I think offers so much imaginative possibilities for the future, and stories that need to be told. And so for me, I think it's always about the relationships, you know, which is why I love the work of Octavia Butler, because she can be so far out, so wild with her imagination, with the aliens and with the time travel and with all the stuff. But then she's so, she just is such a master crafts person at revealing the undercurrent of relationships and the dynamics between people at these moments of crisis and at the end of the world, you know, and also the rebirth of the world too, because she's very much about that. And that was the message of Earthseed, if you're familiar with Parable of the Sower, and that was like the spiritual text that Lauren Olamina, the protagonist, had created during her time of her struggles, trying to figure out the world and kind of remake it through her own experience. And I feel like, for me, that's what I am so, like, I guess maybe excited about when it comes to Afrofuturism, because African traditions, indigenous traditions have such a rich history with birthing worlds, of their own design, and ones that are just and equitable, and ones that, ensure a place for people like myself. You know what I mean? I think that is the thing. It's like, it really is about representation when it comes down to it. I think Afrofuturists just want to make sure that Black folks, brown folks, that we're in the future. I think that's the first priority.
Well, I hear you. I got to just say about Octavia Butler, I really do find her books totally amazingly strange and awesome. But also I felt like she's like so into making new kinds of sexuality and emotions.
Yeah.
Like there was like this creature that could, like, its tongue would taste your DNA. Like it was like a salamander creature. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm reading right now.
I know. I gotta say, the body stuff, the body horror, I'm not a horror person. Like, even though I did my film studies on a I do feel that, like, horror is different. And there's some elements of Butler's work that definitely delves into horror, when you think about it.
I thought it was just like really like sensual.
Yeah, no, that too. I mean,
it was like really like, but like a sexy salamander. Like I didn't even know what to do with that, Like,
no, there was definitely, I know. I know exactly what you mean. And like, so there's a lot of movies out there like that. So, believe it or not, there's a lot of sexy salamander movies, but, I'm thinking of it. Is it Splice? Is it, anyway, but there's, take your pick. It's out there. But for me, I struggle with those ones, I really like the ones that deal with family history, like Kindred is super cool in that way. Fledgling, though, is also one where you get some interesting dynamics, because even in Parable of the Sower, I guess at the end of the world, like, pickings are slim when it comes to who you mate with. So, older folks,
yeah, that's because I
younger
felt
folks.
like they were kind of, well, it's like there's a lot of like, I can't, it's funny because you can't say there's like a message sometimes in those. They're more like these parables. They literally feel like parables, like some sort of epic mythology, like where like there's a lot of violence, and there's a lot of weirdness, but also jealousies and new forms of birth. It's wild. I love it. And I'm really glad that you had a chance. So listen, folks, ask some questions. Lee was kind of send some advanced samples of her work. Thanks, Teresa, for coordinating that. But if anybody got some questions or thoughts, our wonderful attending artists.
Yeah. And I'd also love to hear what y'all are working on too.
Totally.
Hi, Lee. I'm so excited you're here. This is fun. Lee and I met a long time ago. I think Lee was maybe the first time when you presented a project at Philly Steak.
Yeah, and I think it was at Bartram's Garden with Milk.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But anyway, I was thinking about some of the sort of there's like that preparedness, sort of end of time preparedness kit that you made.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that one day, because I couldn't help but feel like there's almost like a comedic element to it too. Like, you're like, this can't be serious, can it? And I was just wondering, like, if you think about that, if that is like part of, like, if that has anything to do with it. Like, I understand it's a very serious topic and I take it seriously too, but I couldn't help but get a sense of that sometimes from the work a little bit.
No, you're exactly right. You're spot on, because I don't know. I think that when you meet me, I'd like to think that I got sunshine to offer folks. I'm not gloom and doom all the time, and the thing is that, my friends tell me I have a sense of humor. I'd like to think I do, especially about these things, some of my favorite films, like if you saw Don't Look Up, or if you saw Zombieland, not Zombieland, Shaun of the Dead, that was hilarious, right? So these films that kind of make fun of the end of the world, I think are necessary, right? Because the thing is, it is a reality and it is frightening, but I definitely feel that one of the ways that I had combated the pushback from funders and other folks that like were trying to receive my work and figure out where to put it was that I would try to like, because even when you're watching films, right? You can deal with the apocalyptic reality in a film or even when you're playing a game, but when someone has like sits down over a glass of wine or, you know, a conversation, then people are like, hey, look, it's enough. Like we're trying to enjoy ourselves. You know, people would stop me at parties if I talk too much about it, right? But I think that when you're in a scenario where it's theater, there's a DJ playing like music. And I mean, you wouldn't believe how many songs there are around apocalypse, right? From every genre there is. There's a song about the end of the world, even love songs, right? So this idea of how can music, how can the arts, you know, kind of add some levity to the situation to help people enter the conversation, right? So we kind of like disarm our fears a bit. And so you're 100% right that like, I feel like the comedic approach helps, you know what I mean? But I also feel that like there are some well done films that are comedic, but then there are moments where you could cry, right? I mean, I don't know, Elf is not apocalyptic, but it's funny and there are moments where you cry. Christmas Story, if you haven't seen it, Will Ferrell. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, that's what I try to do, for sure.
Thanks.
Terms, wait, go ahead, someone. Allison.
Thank you so much for being here and having this opportunity to hear how you think. Where do you get the sunshine that you have to offer people when you focused so much on raising alarms, on going deep into truth and reality? And I'm just really curious, where does that come from?
That's a great question. I appreciate that, Allison. I'll be honest. You know, one of the reasons I started this work is because I literally had a lot of fears around this. You know, I actually approached the dissertation work because I felt like it was the only way for me to face my fears. I suffer from a lot of anxiety and depression. I mean, real stuff. I still do. And you know, just 3 weeks ago, I was in a very violent carjacking, you know, like a block from my neighborhood, and I'm just lucky to be alive. You know what I mean? So I just feel that, like, for me, I'm constantly reminded that you just got to be grateful to be alive. You know what I mean? I try to hold tight to like the love and the connection between people. I am leaning into self-care and doing more things that, I mean, my latte budget, I mean, even though that's just like, you know, I mean, that's kind of what I do sometimes, even though it might be a little bit irresponsible, but I think that also having like some sort of spiritual connection to something, right? Like this idea that there's something beyond ourselves. I try to believe that's something that I hold on to, but I gotta say, Allison, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And I don't want to pretend that like I'm sunshine all the time, because that's absolutely not true. And that's the reality. But in conversations like this, and knowing that you're not alone, you know, I think that's one of the main things when it comes to these apocalyptic films and stuff. One of the main things that nobody wants to be alone at the end of all things, you know? So I think it's that we learned a lot from the pandemic, that connection, we can really take it for granted, you know? And so when everyone was able to free from these boxes that we're in right now, like on Zoom and stuff, you start to like deepen your love and your appreciation and compassion for others, you know, at least that's what we hope, you know, but also, a lot of people went a little extra crazy though, too. So like I said, I mean, hence the carjacking. I mean, people are just, you know, and if you're in Philly, you already know, like, please, like people are out, it's out of control. It's out of control, and the violence and stuff. So that's why it's like, we really got to lean into the light as much as we can, you know, as much as we can.
Sorry to hear about that carjacking. That's awful.
I know, look, I'm telling you, like, and y'all know, please just don't just idly, and I was on a date, it was on the news and everything. It was like, luckily it was not my car, but it was horrifying, you know, it was horrifying. So, you know, I just, like, those are the things though. But even for me, like, I was in the Olympic Park in 1996 when that bomb went off. I wasn't in New York at 9/11, but I was in New York post 9/11. I was working at the New Museum of Contemporary Art at the time when it was located in Soho. And it was like around 2004 and the blackout happened, but we didn't know if it was another terrorist attack or not. And I remember walking across the Williamsburg Bridge in the middle of the afternoon with like thousands. It was like an exodus, thousands of people. And let me tell you, walking across a bridge with thousands of people, like, it's not meant for pitter patter of feet. That bridge was doing the wibble wobble. It was so crazy. And so for me, I've been in actual, you know, I feel like apocalyptic scenarios, like from the bombing to this, and like, you know, it just keeps happening. So also I feel like it's connected to my purpose. I mean, it's not one I really would have chosen, because again, I really just want, I wish we could all live forever. You know what I mean? If we could feel good about it, you know what I mean? But I just realized that for me, it's just like, if there's anything, if I am going to do this work, I got to do it through the arts, because otherwise I would be a serious basket case, and I would be gloom and doom. And it's the arts that helped me bring the sunshine, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't be able to do this work academically, you know? I think the only way that I am able to do this is because I have the arts to inspire me, you know, to connect with others. A lot of my work is highly collaborative. So because of that, I'm learning from other artists, and it's just great, you know, and I'm leaning even more into it. To be honest, I even took off this summer from teaching so that I could dive deeper into my art practice and get closer to creativity so that I could get closer to life, you know, especially after all the shit I've been through.
Well,
Not to mention I caught COVID for my birthday. So, you know, I mean, what are you going to do?
Well, you know, I mean, just as a note, and I'll say this school is a pandemic child, and a lot of folks here, some are new, some have been with us a while, but we've gone through the pandemic together.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is the boxes we've all been in each other's living rooms in these boxes around the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, the pandemics hit people differently, but I would say something that seems to be at root here at the artists that I've noticed is these things that you mentioned are very in the air with folks, which is sustainability, self-care, a certain kind of relationship between you know, First Nations practice, but also a practice that is holistic, you know, and also you can't just have your job over here and your art over there. That's a luxury that not most people cannot afford. You know, there's only so many hours in a week to be creative. So I think these concerns you raise, or ability to navigate life, they say necessity is the mother of invention, and certainly there's tons of necessity. So I do think, especially in Philadelphia, but other cities too around the world, certainly there's a lot. Does anyone else got some things to add? Lee's so great. Go ahead, Cloudy.
Hi, Lee. Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions, if possible. Okay, so one is, okay, so when you were talking, I was thinking, okay, I mean, that's something I feel every day. I can't wait till the apocalypse comes, you know, like, so I can't wait for change to happen. But then I'm thinking, of course, the apocalypse is every day, you know, like COVID and what you just described. So realizing that it's not this future thing that is coming upon us, but it's actually we're living it every day. So I really love you mentioned it very briefly, the concept of a cozy apocalypse.
Right, the cozy catastrophe.
Oh, okay. I love that. I don't know how you envision it. So that's one question. And then if I can just add another one is, you know, I'm dying to, I don't know, discover or have a reference towards new mythological archetypes. And, you know, your thoughts on that? How to get,
those are both interesting questions. No, I love it.
Well, can we stuck in those, or can we get rid of that?
Right, can we try some new ones? No, I love it. Well, for one, the cozy catastrophe, I didn't come up with that term. If anyone watches like apocalypse or sci-fi, this was a term used to describe like when a small band of survivors at the end of all things is kind of forced to rely on each other, you know, for their survival. And then oftentimes, like, for example, they might be Like for example, Zombieland, there was a scene in Zombieland where they ended up at the White House, right? Like, because, you know, everyone's gone and these few survivors, they're just like, you know, enjoying the lap of luxury at the White House, because there's no one else to, you know, kick them out, and, you know, it's free for the taking. And so that's the kind of like cozy catastrophe where, you know, hey, life actually isn't so bad, right? But the idea of, for me, is that like, I was trying to think of that cozy catastrophe of like what you would do in this scenario if you only had a handful of folks that you would be with. What would you do? But then also looking at the fact that cozy is a relative term, you know, and I think that it also, when it comes to Black and brown folks, a lot of times that is not a reality. You know, like you said, it's like it's something we're experiencing every day. So, you know, how does that really play a role? So it's kind of like I play on that term a lot. And that's also the name of the Escape Room project. But then also to your point around the archetypes, you know, I do tarot card decks and archetype decks, world building decks with my students. I also teach at Moore College of Art and Design. And even my students here at Haverford are also doing archetype and basically like world building deck cards, sometimes even imagined through Parable of the Sower and the characters, but they're always around apocalypse, right? And that's the idea, like, what are the emergent archetypes of our time that are telling the apocalypse of this moment, right? And when you think about it, like, I feel like, you know, even thinking about like the healer, I mean, even though that's a timeless thing, because again, there's nothing really new under the sun, but it's like our iteration of it, right? And what does the healer look like in a time of a pandemic? You know, could that be an emergent archetype of this time? But also too, like, I feel like the hacker, for some reason, this one keeps coming up because again, archetypes and especially within the tarot tradition have dark and light attributes, right? So when you think about the hacker, you could think about the hacker in the good sense. If you've seen Fight Club with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton, right? They were hacking for good, right? Because who wants bad credit and who wants like the IRS after you, right? In the end of that story, like they blew up the buildings with all the records and everybody's, you know, slate was wiped clean. But then you got the bad hackers. I was also someone catfished the heck out of me. It's been a bad year, folks, but I'm just saying that like they come from you at all angles. And so I've been hacked, you know, and that's a horrible feeling.
The hacker.
I know. Yeah.
Such a good archetype. That is so.
But it is, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it could be for good, for bad, you know. And when I think about escape artists, like there's always like a sci-fi story where someone's hacking, right? I think that like Rihanna played a hacker in like Ocean's 18 or 20 or whatever one it was with all the ladies with Kate Blanchett in them. So I do think that like it's really up to us to try to see like who are those resonant figures in the moment that are rising to the occasion, you know? And who are the ones that are really also oppressing us, right? Because we talk about capitalism, like the corporation is an archetype. I don't think that, you know, back when they were doing tarot and the traditions of like the gypsies or whatever, you know what I mean? Back in the day, the corporation was not an archetype, right? But in the deck of today, the corporation is at the heart of so many things. And again, the dark and light attributes, like you might think that, oh, like some of us may have been employed at Google or Amazon or some of these places, you know, and had good lives and, you know, learned a lot of good things. But then also when we think on the flip side, there's so many bad things that come with this idea of the corporation. And even in that documentary, The Corporation, they reduced it to archetypes because I think there was like the symbol or the logo for the branding of the film had like horns and like it was mixed with the halo and the horns and the pitchfork and stuff. So aligning the corporation with the malignant or the ominous devil as well as with the angel, right? Of course, because we think capitalism is doing good for I guess the 1% or how many percent, you know what I mean? I'm still trying to find my groove in it all. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. But I think it's up to us though, Claudia. I think we need to think about, you know, what archetypes are we going to put forward and invest and what stories are we going to tell that elevate these archetypes that we want to be, you know, the center of our new stories that we're telling.
Oh my gosh, I was so tempted to somehow have Lee work with the school to make our own deck, a task deck.
Right? I
That'd be
mean,
fun.
look,
I mean,
decks
it's
are
really
powerful.
good.
They're really powerful.
They're really cool, and I think this conversation's been so inspiring, and thoughtful and provocative. And I feel for you and all you've been through. God, this
Thank
city,
you.
Philly is not an easy city. Let's just put it.
It's
out.
not an easy city. And I came back, Nato, it's just like, I came back because New York was too much. Look, New York was too much. And I was like, well, Philly's a better pace. My family's here. Like, I can handle Philly, but.
It's good. Well, Teresa's looking at me like, don't be tough on Philly. All right, it's all good. I got the Philly love.
No, but I still love it. Like, and that's the thing. They talk about what they call it, the love and grit, right? Shout out to the Love and Grit podcast here in Philly. But, it's true. It's just like, I think it comes with all the things, and, but that's what it is about, when you think about survival, it really is about your community. And I think that I can make it here in Philly because of my community. And that has a lot to do with why I'm still here.
I really appreciate that. Well, I'd love to talk another time about the school with you, just me and you, and certainly give it up for Lee.
This has been great. Thank you so much for having me. Yes. I hope y'all enjoy your Friday, you enjoy your weekend, and get some sunshine wherever you are.
Artists around the world, teaching artists around the